Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm Sarah Watt.
And I'm William Chen.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. This month, we are discussing Avatar, The Way of Water, which came out at the end of last year, and Titanic, which came out 25 years ago.
Goodness gracious.
1997. I was 12 years old. You probably were similarly aged.
Me too.
Yeah. The connection being they are both directed by James Cameron. They are both set in water. And they are both one of the top $2 billion grossing films of all time.
Yeah. Both star Kate Winslet.
Both star Kate Winslet.
And that's the only similarity for the whole thing.
Please be warned, we'll be spoilering both films, and I think both films have some fantastic things to be spoiled. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't seen either, and if you haven't seen Titanic, where have you been living?
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen either, I suggest pausing this episode and coming back to it at a future date. All right, Sarah, give us a bit of an overview of 1997's Titanic.
Titanic. Romeo and Juliet set on the rising and falling waves, ladies and gentlemen. 1997, fantastic film by James Cameron, laying my cards on the table there, starring a relatively new Kate Winslet, fresh from Heavenly Creatures, and a not so relatively new Leonardo DiCaprio, who they play the rich girl and the poor guy who fall madly in love on the Titanic's maiden voyage in April of 1912 as it crosses from
Ireland,
that would be why I was going to do that accent, Ireland to America.
To New York.
And of course, en route, tragedy befalls them in the shape of a large piece of ice. And a la Romeo and Juliet, not everybody lasts till the very end of the story.
Oh dear.
But it is a romantic tragedy and a soaring, an epic, bombastic piece of filmmaking.
Brilliant. William, give us an overview of James Cameron's.
Yes, not Jane Campion's.
No. James Cameron's latest film, Avatar, Way of Water.
Avatar, The Way of Water is James Cameron's long gestating movie. Just like the first Avatar, what was that? That was Titanic, and then 2009, so 12 years for that, and it's another 13 years for this. It details the story of Jake Sully and Neytiri from the first movie, what are they called?
Na'vi?
Yeah, Na'vi. I was going to call them avatars. But two Na'vi on the moon of Pandora. And after the first movie, detailing how they start a family, start raising their kids, before the evil sky people, the humans, start coming back to plunder more of their moon's resources. The movie goes into all sorts of weird and wonderful directions, and featuring lots of unexpected Kiwi and Aussie actors. So, huge epic space adventure from the master of them all, James Cameron himself.
Brilliant. And I guess we mentioned that Kate Winslet was also in both films, and it's fair to say that it's quite a different role from the young Rose DeWitt, was it?
That's right.
DeWitt and
David Farrier, who's very onto it, he tweeted or whatever that he'd watched the whole of Avatar and got to the end and still couldn't figure out who Kate Winslet was. And I definitely, because of course everybody is configured differently from their real selves, it took me a long time. I was listening very carefully to everybody's voices to try and identify her. And she's, of course, Cliff Curtis's pregnant wife, isn't she? I want to call it On the Island. I'm very simple. To me, it's not a planet. It's not in space. To me, it's like Moana. You know, it's on a desert island sort of thing. So I get very confused. So expect a lot of confusion from me, from this side of the table, I'm afraid.
It is like Moana in the sense that it's an amalgamation of different Pacific Island cultures, and with some controversy, both films, but definitely Avatar Way of Water has had, some criticism about how very clear Māori, Samoan, Tongan motifs, and actively so. He engaged with different experts in those spaces to tell an alien story and furthering the othering of indigenous peoples. I don't know if you've heard any of this
I'd
criticism.
heard a little bit, but I didn't realise it was to do with the othering, and I just assumed it was an objection to cultural appropriation. And because I'm neither Pacifica nor Maori, I don't really have a right to have a view or a stake, but it felt from an observational perspective considered intentional and respectful. But that obviously doesn't, as I say, that doesn't give me the right to say that actually some things are absolutely off limits, are tapu.
I'm going to say this. I think Avatar 2 is way, way better than Avatar 1. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yes, I do.
But so many of the things that I guess people have talked about over the years with how Avatar is just dances with wolves in space and they're Smurfs, you know, the South Park joke. How you have a very, very nondescript Native American, Native people stand-in with the Na'vi, and you have the colonists coming in, and it's just it's a movie built on tropes, right? There's the quote unquote white savior guy who is the Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai, and he does his thing. He falls in love with the chieftain's daughter. And I find maybe it's because James Cameron has taken these comments and these criticisms to heart, and maybe it's because he's no longer the sole writer of this movie. Like, he has a writing team. This is Avatar 2, Way of Water is very, very cognizant and very, very specific in how it portrays its themes and how it portrays the different characters and character motivations. And I think it's much more sophisticated than Avatar 1.
Is the argument not that Avatar 1 would really just have been a vehicle, though, for really spectacular, hitherto unseen technology?
I think so. I think James Cameron, in all his movies, Titanic included, is very much about heart.
Yes.
Right? He tells big stories with huge driving
And
human
Terminator
emotions.
Which is absolutely my fave. Absolutely. Aliens is superb.
Like every
Do you
single...
quite like Aliens?
I do.
Jeremy. Oh, right.
do.
Do you quite... Oh, yeah, okay.
I think every single one of those movies, True Lies is about family.
Yeah.
Right? It is about family. But like...
Every film is about family. I don't know if you know, but Avatar Way of Water is also about
totes.
family.
Yeah. And you read the interviews, it's like he was trying to grapple with the fact that he's an aging dad and he has very young children now.
Yeah.
And how does he, talk about these emotions on the big screen? Well, you do it in the way that Jake and Neteri, who were these warriors, these, unstoppable killing machines, and now they can't be that anymore because they're parents,
Yeah, he's talked quite openly as well about his motivation for making this story is the environmental protection aspect. And when he first when he was pitching the first Avatar, I think a bigwig at the studio sort of said, "Oh, we love the film, but can you take out all the kind of hippy dippy tree hugging stuff?" And he's quoted as saying, "Well, actually, no, that's why I'm making the movie, is for the hippy dippy tree hugging stuff." And I know that he has said as well he was considering finishing filmmaking because he just had kind of done his dash. I mean, I agree with him. He's made every single one of his films is brilliant, and. But he said that it was actually indigenous peoples that came to him and said, "Oh, thank you, this is our life. We've been trying to tell these stories of our life for generations." And so I think that motivated him to continue with the world that he was trying to create. And I guess, again, we don't have anyone of indigenous to the Pacific here around the table, but I know, I'm thinking, how else could he tell us a version of the story without making his own world? He's done the work to make the world, and I just thought I have to agree with you, William. I thought it was so much more sophisticated. It got around all of the awkward talking about othering, the body ableism of the first movie.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Which is when I was rewatching the first film in preparation for watching the second movie, I was like, "Oh, this wouldn't fly now in 2023."
But the children did laugh at the I don't know what the name of Cliff Curtis's tribe is called actually, but they did laugh at the flipper hand.
They did, but that's part of the story, right? That prejudice is part of the story. Whereas,
and then in turn, the Reef tribe laugh at their tails.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay,
whereas
fair enough.
in
Yeah,
the first
no,
movie,
right.
it's like
No, I know.
being in a wheelchair is horrible life.
Yes, that's
must
right.
become alien
Yeah.
to be
That's
happy.
right.
You know,
That's right. Yeah.
to experience life, to feel soil between your toes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I agree. I thought the second film was fantastic. It was a recreating of the world. Like I do feel like film 1 was a whole lot of setup. Film 2 is a whole lot of setup for things yet to come. I think the two mother characters were, I don't want to say underserved. I just think Nateri clearly took a step back in this film to make room for her children. But also the Kate Winslet character, I think she's being set up for something big, as is the Kitty character.
Oh my gosh,
She's got a lot of potential.
Is that Sigourney Weaver?
Sigourney Weaver's character.
What do you feel about that? A lot of people find it really orcs that Sigourney Weaver plays the young girl.
Yeah, she doesn't sound like a 14-year-old. But isn't that the dream of mocap? Right? Why do I keep bringing this movie up? Beowulf. Robert Zemeckis' Beowulf.
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible movie.
Ray Winstone. That's
But
all
Ray
I think.
Winstone,
Yeah.
like, oi, I'm big old Ray Winstone, playing this svelte, Norse warrior.
Yeah.
And that movie was a while ago, but this is kind of that dream, right? That hypothetically any actor could play any role and somehow make it work.
I think I love it for that, and I agree with you that her voice does sound not 14, but she is this kind of, is she immaculately conceived? Is she AWA conceived? We don't really know how yet, but there is a sense that she is a version of Grace.
That's
and so
right.
her voice isn't as out of place for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I actually fell for it, if you will, because it took me a while to realise that it was Sigourney Weaver. So I did think it was a young person. So I don't necessarily agree that she doesn't sound 14. And then when I got it, and I was like, oh, I see what they're doing here. That's clever. But then I just sort of thought, I don't know. Maybe it's one of those weird things when you know who the real life person is behind a voice of an animated or a mocap character, and it just jars slightly or feels a bit funny. I don't know.
So you know that he calls it performance capture, James Cameron, because motion capture would imply
Undersells it, that it's just them
just
moving.
the motion, which is what it was with Gollum and the likes.
That's
but,
right.
but
Whereas their faces are doing the acting.
they are recording their faces,
Yes.
their movement, but their whole performance.
Yeah.
I found it fascinating how so much of the production of this movie was about getting the actors to free dive and to actually film performance capture underwater.
Yeah.
Because they're animated characters. You don't need to do this.
No, you don't.
You could frame by frame animate quite convincing, realistic movements of the Na'vi characters swimming through the water, right? That's fine. But James Cameron straddles kind of this technological chasm where it's like he's using a real camera underwater, filming real people swimming underwater and translating those motions and his camera movement into a digital realm. I find that fascinating.
And it works. I don't know about the two of you. For me, because I saw this film twice, and once in 3D, once in 2D, I forgot very quickly that this was fake. I was just fully engaged in this world. These alien creatures were real to me, and I think that the focus on an actor's performance, which is so lacking in modern blockbuster movies today,
100%.
is just spoke to my heart. And I guess something I want to talk about later is I feel the same way about Titanic for different reasons, but I just think his for all of his skills, James Cameron is a director, and he's got many incredible skills as a director and writer. His focus on the actors is so not just because I am an actor, but also it works as an audience member. I believed every one of those characters, and I believed that love of that family, and I believed the stakes were so high. I was so concerned for so many of their lives, like that sequence near the start where the kids get first captured by the Marines, because you know that one of the kids is going to die at some point. You know, I was pretty clear who was going to be pretty early on, but
but it was clear once everyone else got character development. Apart from this one guy who's just he's there.
But you know, that was...
It's a real honouring, isn't it? In a way that, I know we mention Marvel every time, but in a way, you know, even now when they've been doing Avengers movies since, I don't know when, the Dark Ages, that when they're jumping and running, to me, it really looks video gamey. And they're spinning in the air and all that.
Yeah.
And there isn't as much of an opportunity for proper acting, and it's just sort of a vehicle for fight scenes or something. And I think it's probably very honouring of James Cameron, perhaps. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit. Maybe he just wants the movie to be that amazing. But it's nice that he's going to give the actors an opportunity to act.
I think he recognises that humans connect with humans, and if you take the actor out of the film, then you've got a problem. And I think, it was so enjoyable.
So do you think, and this is a little bit mean, but he won't be listening, do you think therefore he regrets in any way casting Sam Worthington in the first one? Because Sam is not a great actor.
I think Sam Worthington actually works pretty well in the second one.
Yeah, he's better in the second one.
I think he's
to be
better,
fair.
and it's fun because he's just a dum-dum. Like Jake is, he's the chosen one.
Yeah.
But in both movies, he's like, ooh, me Marine, me like, fight.
Yeah.
And there's many scenes of his family members like, Dad, you're being dumb again.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Sam Worthington, just his mannerisms, I think really works for that.
But that's probably Sam, right? Do you know what I mean? It's not so much. I mean, in this one, he's got proper. Well, I was going to say proper actors. Actually, no. Apart from Kate Winslet, and Cliff Curtis.
And Sigourney Weaver.
That's what it
Yeah, but
says.
Sigourney was in the first. No, Jermaine Clement in this is a waste of time. He's in one scene.
I agree.
He has a ridiculous accent. He doesn't get to be funny.
Yeah.
And he says incredibly banal dialogue. Edie Falco is
Oh my God.
amazing.
Edie Falco in the mech suit. Avatar 3, sign me up.
Yeah, she's clearly going to be... Okay, so the dad's... The guy who became an Avatar, the baddie, what's his name? Colgurn? Quaritch.
Yeah.
He's going to have a redemption arc, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
he's going to die
absolutely.
in service of the biggest picture.
Yeah.
She's going to be the big villain. And the big villain will be Progress. She won't be a snarling evil villain like him.
Yeah.
She's going to be collected, calm, and let's move forward.
And
with
that's
progress.
cool. I like that a lot. And I love that it's Edie Falco as well. Yeah, okay.
So you don't like Jermaine Clement.
In this, I think he's utterly wasted.
What about Brendan Cowell?
Who's Brendan Cowell?
He's his boss, the most normal Australian bloke you will ever see in a blockbuster.
The one talking with an Aussie accent.
The evil whaling guy.
Oh yeah.
He's just this random dude from the streets of Sydney who's suddenly in Avatar: The Way of Water.
He does feel like he just walked off the set of Neighbours and into, and he's still carrying his tinny or something like that.
I will say that the scene where his arm gets chopped off, I saw this in Taiwan with a Taiwanese audience who are not the most vocal of audiences. It was packed, but everyone was really quiet.
Yeah.
Being very, very respectful. But when that arm went flying, everyone went, wow! And it's such this moment of catharsis.
Yes.
It's brilliant.
True.
And
That's true.
I quite enjoyed how violent the film was. Like, there was arrows to torsos, and Neytiri was amazing at the end when she's just slashing and hacking, and I thought it was brilliant.
May I just say, my favourite thing about it was the production design of those incredible houses that are literally over the water on stilts. And I thought to myself, why are there not resorts around the world that have... and I know you can get lovely, not cabins, but you know what I mean. You can, in very expensive resorts, be out on stilts like that. But I'm loving the whole openness of it, and it's just... lovely cushions inside and that very, very taut animal skin or whatever the heck it would be. And I think, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm really into that. And the way they walk along those platforms and that.
When they were walking along those platforms, what was going through my mind was, how the heck did they do that?
You know how they did that, eh?
No, because they bounce. And it looks so realistic.
So they built all of those netting in a warehouse. So they were walking along those nettings. It's really cool. You should go and watch some of that stuff.
Okay.
And they pretty much filmed the film in one soundstage or maybe a series of soundstages, and they had various pieces to mimic things like that. And so when you see the family bouncing along, they're all bouncing along with sort of fake hair pieces on and backpacks and things.
Because like the children are playing and being goofy, and it just looks so real.
Yeah. I just didn't even think about it. Didn't even question it.
And I think that's one of the cool things they did as well. Like, they just spent all that time focusing on getting the performance right
And the movement.
and then they had it filmed from every angle because it was all on the computer, and he could put his camera wherever he wants.
That's amazing.
So he didn't have to worry about the big water coming through the chandelier, whatever it is in Titanic, only happening once, or he didn't have to worry about the sunset being perfect for the kiss on Titanic, and he just had to focus on getting the performance right, and then figure it all out in post later. It's just kind of amazing. Like, it's almost like the antithesis of actors, but it isn't. This is. I think some of the actors have said this is the most actorly experience they've ever had, and I was like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And then now that I've seen the film and I've seen some of the making of, I'm like, well, that's what you mean. It's because you could just focus with your director on acting. And I just want to say, with my theatre experience, because I was saying this to someone recently, in theatre, you typically, in a good experience, you will get 2 months, or if you're working professionally, maybe 2 weeks, leading up to Tech Week, just with you and your director and your castmates, finding the magic of the performance, so that when you get to Tech Week, you know the director's going to be busy worrying about lighting and set and all those, the orchestra coming in, and you just do what you've already agreed upon and do it the best you can within, and work it within the space you're in. And so that's how it works. But in a film, I realise you probably very rarely get that, because it is all happening at once and everybody's stressed and you're running out of time and you've got to get it in the moment. So I thought it was fantastic.
Can we pivot? We will come back, but can we pivot then? Who the heck said we should compare this to Titanic? And tell me what you think of Inland.
It was me.
Yeah, why?
Because it's about water and it's a James Cameron epic.
I think there's so...
Great.
Sarah,
William, hit me.
Okay, I think there's so much connective tissue between
Do
the
it.
two movies. Okay, focusing on water. The villain being capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism. The whole notion of nature versus man, and how man will always lose in the end. It's not even a question, right? The focus on kind of a journey of sorts with water as a catalyst. I found that so interesting. Like, the way of water is in Titanic as well. Well, what they talk about in The Way of Water being that it's following the flow of your life. Like, it's not really destiny. It's resisting going against the flow. It's kind of falling into place, everything that should be. When I rewatched Titanic, that's the arc that Jack and Rose, or especially Rose, goes on.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I think thematically, visually, there's so many things translating from Titanic to me to Avatar: Way of Water.
I really like this, William. For me, because I rewatched Titanic 2 nights ago, I love Titanic. When I first saw it as a 12-year-old, didn't care too much for it. I just remember I really needed to go to the toilet because it was so long. But I rewatched it when I was a student and just fell in love with the film. I was like, this is an amazing movie. And watched it multiple times. Haven't watched it in a few years. Had an absolute blast. Felt emotional. Felt scared. The terror of the ship sinking really hit me in a way that I don't know why it didn't hit me as hard before.
And they set it up very, very well.
Well, this is the thing, right? So the film is an hour and a half of a romantic period drama.
Yeah.
And then it turns to a disaster horror film.
Yeah.
And I looked
Amazingly.
at the timestamp. It's exactly halfway.
Yeah.
When the iceberg hits.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I thought about the fact that, remember at the beginning of Top Gun Maverick, the characters show a computer generation of what the mission's going to be. And so at the very beginning of Titanic, that oafish dude, oh my gosh, the typical
He's
90s
so 90s.
kind
so
of
90s.
bearded oaf with
He's a funny guy.
He is a funny guy. The cynical one with the happy face with the bullet hole through the forehead. And he plays the video back and he's talking about how it then hits this and then it snaps in half and it goes down. And you watch it. And I don't remember what that was like the first time because I watched it 3 times in the cinema back then and have seen it at least 3 times since. But how amazing that they gave that game away right at the very beginning, and then you've got the whole film building up to it. But it's that whole thing of Alfred Hitchcock's suspense, isn't it? So instead of having a shock that happens, it's the suspense of we know what's going to happen, and now we're just waiting for that to unfold.
I mean, that's the point, isn't it? We all know the Titanic's going to sink. That
Exactly.
we're going into the movie. I don't think there's not very many people that
No.
would not know that. I mean, the film gives it away from the first shot of the movie, but that's that difference, right? Of knowing it from a history book or seeing it on a computer model recreation and this kind of garish explanation, and he's sort of enjoying the action of it. But then it's actually, and Rose says it, right? She says, "Oh, so the experience is quite different," and then you feel it, and again, I'll come back to the acting, but I just think there are all these incredible smaller characters, all played by amazing actors, who each of them show you a different part of the sinking. Most of them die in the process, but someone will die over here, or someone will die at this point, or someone will fall into the water at this point.
My memory of Titanic as a kid was I was really sad that Leo's Italian friend died. When the big old what's it called, the chimney falls on him, and it's like, oh, I liked him.
Yeah, which
That was
apparently he
my
originally
memory.
he didn't die in that manner. He escaped and they filmed it, or maybe it was in the script, and he went to get on the lifeboat and Cal smacks him in the face.
And pushes
Kills
him
him.
off.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I
Yeah.
thought I'd seen that. Have I not?
Maybe you've seen a cutscene of that.
Oh,
Okay.
right.
Yeah. But back to the Way of Water, and what struck me in a way that I've just never kind of clicked with before is this film is Rose's film, and I know that seems really obvious to say because she's the old lady telling the story, but she is the protagonist. Like Jack is there, but it is her emotional arc, and I think the promise. And as a kid, I didn't understand that the promise of "Don't Let You Let Go" was to not give up on life, and she starts the film with completely giving up on life. And the whole arc is her learning to trust her instincts or trust the way things should be. To the point where she even goes against Jack's advice when she's in that boat and Cal and Jack are looking down at her going, "You'll be fine." And she still has, by that point, she's learned from Jack that she needs to trust her gut. And that's the thing that she goes with. And it's quite an astounding character journey, and what a wonderful. I cried because I was like, she has lived this old life. She's become this old person. She's lived a great life, and just that simple shot of the photos, and it's just wonderful. And I'm like, James Cameron, how did you manage to tell this incredible human story about what matters in life through one of modern history's most tragic events?
The scene that struck me on a rewatch was when, and I love this scene when he has to go to dinner with all those poshos, and he handles himself pretty well. And I love that Kathy Bates, unsinkable Molly Brown, is really on his side. Just start on the outside and work your way in, and all that, which I just absolutely love. But the fact,
I still think about that every time I go to a fancy
yeah,
restaurant.
right. That's how I do think.
Like,
that
how
is-
do I do this?
Exactly. That's how a lot of people, especially perhaps our generation, learned about the whole, knife and forks at a restaurant. But it feels over-egged when you think about it now. But in that conversation around the dinner table, Jack is all about, they're trying to be sneery, and they're all like, how did you get on board? Oh, and you don't have a fixed abode? How does that, how's that going for you? And he talks about seizing the day, effectively, but not using the Dead Poets Society phrase. And making the most of every moment, because you never know what's coming, and you never know. And at the time, I didn't realise that was foreshadowing that he wasn't going to make it. But then because on the first watch, I'm sure that I thought he would live. I think I remember everybody was appalled, that Rose took the door, but there have subsequently been scientific evidence to say it's okay, they would never have made it. Let it go. But I didn't assume in those days that Hollywood would be so brave as to get rid of him. Anyway, but in the dinner table, he's like, you have to do everything, you never know what's coming, you seize every moment, luck is what you make of it, and blah, blah, blah. And Rose, I can't remember what the phrase is, but Rose says, oh yes, she does, she toasts him to making it count, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you say, she does go on to make it count.
Well, let's talk about this, because there's a lot of little foreshadowings and payoffs. So, you've literally got a loaded gun.
Well, there's an iceberg.
Well, yeah, there is. Can smell ice. But there's a loaded gun that, of course, comes back into it in the most bombastic kind of sequence. It's great.
Yeah.
I love that Billy Zane basically becomes the Terminator.
Yeah.
Or there's the
He's
make
so
it
evil.
count.
He's so
evil.
comically evil. I just love that guy.
Yeah.
Can I just say, was that his first go? That must have been his first thing after Dead Calm, right? Because he was the baddie in Dead Calm against Nicole Kidman and Sam Neill.
Oh, right.
Which is
Wait. He was in The Phantom, right, in 1995? He was the lead.
the Phantom, was it? Okay. So there must have been.
Is it
so that was
95?
his
I think it
trajectory.
was somewhere around there.
It was 1998.
Good at being,
was it?
Should we have a look?
Okay.
Yes. Good at being a baddie, though.
Yeah.
Definitely good at being somewhat charming and good looking, and also just kind of dark and evil.
A very, very punchable face.
That's right.
He's very good looking, though. Billy Zane is
Yeah.
he's a nice what's the word, counterpoint to
Leo's
Leonardo
softness.
DiCaprio.
That scene where he shouts at Rose the next morning after she's been dancing down in steerage, he's really frightening.
Yeah.
And Rose, who has actually, up until then, been quite a tough cookie, like she doesn't come on board like this wussy girl and then find herself. She already has her thoughts and feelings, but yes, she feels trapped. But anyway, he absolutely reduces Kate Winslet to quivering fear, and her performance is outstanding.
Yeah.
And you see that the rose has been crushed, and the petals torn from her. It's a very humbling kind of moment. He is terrifying.
So, first of all, 1996, I was wrong.
Oh,
so
okay.
it was before, he was the lead in that film before Titanic.
Right.
She is incredible, and you mentioned Heavenly Creatures. She'd also
Yeah.
done Sense and Sensibility
Before
that as
then.
well, which
And so she
had a lot
won
of Oscar buzz.
Right, yeah. She was nominated.
I think she was nominated. And but back to my point about make it count, and then he uses that to kind of get her to come out to the stairwell and go downstairs. But there's that moment where she spits on Cal's face, which is wonderful. Such a wonderful harking back to that moment.
The training to...
Yeah, which is a great scene when they come out. That was improvised, or that was made up. It was made up on set by Kate Winslet. So the original story was her stabbing a hairpin into his head or something, into his gut. And James Cameron said, "Now do the spit." And so to the point where she ran out of spit, and she had to put lube in her mouth and kind of hoik that onto his face.
Did he know that was going to happen? Or?
Well, they knew before they filmed it. And they did it many
Billy Zane
times.
knew it would happen.
Yeah, but he said he kind of got into this numb state of being spat on because it had so many takes of the spit.
Yeah, right.
But just the focus on, again, actors, and I come back to this point, and Kate Winslet is just a charismatic superstar in this. She's just so wonderful to watch. And there's moments like that. I know the moment where they had that first meet cute. Well, it wasn't really meet cute because the meet cute was the suicide scene, but later on the ship the next day, a lot of that was improvised. The comment, Freud, who is this guy? Is he a passenger on the ship? Was an improvised line.
Oh, really?
Those jokes were kind of hack-and-eyed, looking back.
But he was so ignorant.
There was that. There was
Picasso.
Yeah,
He'll never amount to a thing.
Well, which that really irked me watching it this time around. Demoiselle is in a museum right now. How could it be on the Titanic? Wait, what?
I did think that. There was in the Monet as well. I don't think so. But it makes me think of the French and Saunders mockery of this film, which is just wonderful. And they
I should rewatch it.
pretty much verbatim take lines from the film.
Yeah.
And Picasso, he won't amount to much. But yeah.
But you were saying that Kate Winslet's performance was wonderful.
Just this was her shot at a superstardom, didn't it?
Yeah.
And there's something about her that if you look at the kind of actresses of the time, you can see that it was not a typical big blockbuster actress. She's just phenomenal.
She has range, definitely.
Yeah.
I was one of my other favourite scenes, probably most people's favourite scenes because there's boobs in it. Is when she says, "Paint me as I want you to paint me or draw me as one of your French girls." And Leo is terrific in that, as the young lad who actually is a man of the world to some extent, but suddenly this incredibly glamorous, very, very wealthy woman is dropping her robe in front of him, and she's in control of the whole scenario. And his acting is terrific in terms of being, and so his professional brain is going, well, put your hands like this and do that, okay, great. And then you can see that he's also just kind of like almost doesn't know where to look, and it's that teenage boy feeling of, now this fantasy is unveiling itself in front of me. What am I going to do?
We kind of shifts, doesn't he? He starts off very nervous, and then he becomes.
Absolutely.
Then he does get into his artistic brain, and you can see him forgets the tension of the scene and just gets into it. And he, again, another just to come to my other point, that line where he goes, "Get on the bed," couch, is a mistake, right? It's an actual mistake, and they kept it in the film.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Where was Leo before this? Was it What's Eating Gilbert Grape? Or
for sure.
Yeah, and Basketball Diaries.
And This Boy's Life.
Romeo and Juliet had come out.
Oh,
and Claire
of course.
Danes was going. Claire Danes had been asked to do Titanic, and she's talked about how she turned it down because she knew that film would jettison her or push her into the stratosphere of stardom, and she just thought. Her and Leo talked about it, and she just thought, I just don't actually want that I don't want that pathway. I don't want to become that famous. And he did.
And yet how interesting, because Romeo and Juliet absolutely made her. But that's really admirable, isn't it? I don't know that I would have enjoyed seeing them again in another Romeo and Juliet story.
Yeah.
Oh, can I just very briefly say that the obvious comparisons, but in case they're not obvious... Oh, Revolutionary Road. That was Kate and Leo.
Yeah. It's like an alternate universe where they both survived
Absolutely.
and then ended up hating
really
each other.
miserable. That was a brilliant film directed by Sam Mendes, her then husband.
Yeah.
But all I was going to say about the whole Romeo and Juliet thing, I've always had a bee in my bonnet, middle-aged woman that I am with life experience, about Romeo and Juliet, blame William Shakespeare, that these two lovers are held up as being this paragon of romance, when the reality is that, if you meet someone and one of you is like on E or something at a party, and you meet and you fall in love, yes, the chemicals, and anyone who's a biologist around the table will know this as well, the chemicals do make you feel infatuated and in love for actually longer than 3 days. But it isn't realistic. That's why summer romances don't always work and all that sort of thing. And so Romeo and Juliet get together and it all ends in tears. And they're from, opposite sides of the tracks and so on and so forth, and being sort of kept apart. And obviously the same with old Rose and Jack. And
It was like a 3-day relationship?
yeah, if that. I mean, I've tried to...
Because they meet on the
First
eve of leaving Ireland. Right?
That's right. So they
that's
meet
the
on the
second
first night.
They met on the first night, so the ship's left the dock.
okay.
The
and
second night he comes to dinner and she dances downstairs.
And the third night
the
they
third
die.
night is the one where they're running around.
Yeah.
I also he paints her on the 14th, but the ship goes down on the 15th. Yeah, because the painting is signed the 14th of April.
Well, it would have been the morning
The
of
morning
of the
obviously.
15th.
Yeah, that's right. Is when the ship goes down at 2 in the morning or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so, and basically, right, they don't consummate that relationship until they're in the car, right? Which is also a nice touch, because you think, she's been nudie in front of him, and it's all been this
and she brings it up.
eroticism.
She's like, did we do it?
Yeah.
That's right. I love that scene. It's the old lady as well.
Yeah.
But I read as well that they, to maintain a PG-13 rating, which the studio insisted on with that much money they were investing, it needed to... you could have some nudity, but in a non-sexual way.
Yep.
And so that's why the sex scene is relatively demure based on the nudity that you see earlier.
Yeah.
And that sex scene is amazing.
It is amazing.
They're so hot and steamy.
Yes.
The entirety of the car is just frosted.
Exactly.
And then when the goons come to find them in the end, you still
just
see the
the
frozen
handprint.
handprint. And the two of them give each other, hey, here we go.
That's right.
But, I mean, this is great storytelling again. So it's a moment of sex, of love, of consummation in this very kind of private space, and it's sort of the space where it is the hoity-toity car, and it's where she was first introduced. But it's then used to show the peril of their situation, because the first people to die are those people down in the area.
In steerage.
Yeah.
Steerage, you see it
who's
flood
at
with
the
water.
car.
That's right.
And it just immediately you get the sense of like, okay, this is on, because
Yeah.
they were just in there and they could have just died.
Yeah.
Just the same way with all of that horrible sequence with the men working in the coal kind of shoveling areas, and all the doors are closing, and
Come on, lads, they're closing the doors.
yeah.
Can we talk about the painting scene just a little bit more? You guys talked about Leo, but I think Kate's acting is also really good in
Yes.
that. I read that was the first scene that they shot together.
Yeah, I think it was.
Which scene is this?
The when he's
The
drawing
nude scene.
her on the bed, couch.
Right.
And I just don't remember as a kid like getting all the tics and things, because she's like really goofy and like, oh, Mr. Serious Artist, and it's such chemistry, like
Yeah.
and of course with the swelling of my heart. Is that when my heart will go on?
Or
Is
the
that when it plays?
motif comes through a lot.
No, not the lyrics, because that
No.
happens at the very end. But that's when it just swells, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is really incredible stuff. But I think Jack, this viewing, he's an interesting character, this one, because did it feel to either of you that he was a bit of and I don't really like this word, especially when it pertains to female characters, but the male version, a Marty Stew?
What's a Marty Stew?
A Marty Stew is a
Mary
male
Sue.
version of a Mary Sue. So a character who's just, he's awesome or she's awesome. They're great at everything. They're in touch with their emotions. That they can just be whatever they want. That they've self-actualized before the movies even start.
Oh, I see.
And so I see him coming in as kind of being a catalyst for Rose's transformation.
Right.
But like Leo plays him with such a oh shucks energy, like I'm from Wisconsin. And when he sees the paintings, like, yeah, this one's Monet. See how his brushstrokes and the colors, and he's like this perfect,
yes,
like manic pixie dream guy almost.
Yes, interesting.
Which I mean, you're right.
I think he throughout the movie, not just in that scene, but he often comes up as seeming younger than Rose.
Yes.
Right? He
Oh,
almost
no, he
seems like
definitely
her
does.
younger brother in a lot of scenes.
But he looks younger. That's
he
the
looks
thing. Leo
younger,
can't help
but
it.
he also acts younger. Like
Yeah.
he's more playful and he's more like again he goofs around and he has more energy and it's just a really interesting juxtaposition.
But at the age that they both are, boys are younger. They
Right.
still were immaturer in those days. Trust me. And so it kind of totally. It's very authentic in that regard, even though I think he is actually in reality a year or two older than Kate. But yeah, not you wouldn't have seen it like that.
You are right. He is that character. I think that it works because he is a man, right? It's not a trope. It's a plot device and it works. But I want to get back to something you said, Sarah, which is that she's in control, and it really struck me this time as well how much everything in this film. I think there's even a sequence where, Fabrizio, is that his name? Fabrizio. He asks the woman he's courting, can I put my hand here? I was like, in a time where we're talking a lot about consent in this day and age, that film's a really good representation. And Kate Winslet, there was another moment where
she's in the car and she drags him over the back. He's all like, oh, I'm pretending to drive the car. Where to? You know. And then, so she initiates that.
Yeah.
She initiates the whole, I want you to draw me. She initiates being butt naked for it.
And she has the choice, and this is another thing I loved as well. Like he has that moment where he tells her like, "I love you," and or whatever. I don't think she says "I love you," but he says to her like when he pulls her into the gym, and then she goes, "I can't," and then she goes away, and it's not like I was trying to remember what made her change her mind. It's like, does she have another horrible interaction with Cal? And I was like, I loved that the moment was between two women. She was looking at two women. So she looks across at the mother and the daughter. Right. And that's the moment. It's not about a man. It's not about Cal. It's actually not even about Jack. It's like, I can't live my life
that will be
like
my
that
life.
little girl or that mum. And I think that was just another great moment. It was very...
And completely wordless.
Completely what? Wordless.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, apart from the mum saying that story about, we had to go and do all of the invitations again. She's just nauseated by this thing. The only thing I'll criticize the film for in terms of representation is the use of cigarettes as a way of showing freedom. Do you notice that? Like she got told off for smoking her cigarette, and he's smoking his little cigarette, and
she's drinking the pint of beer, and
I mean, the beer's
that's right.
She's
trying to be down to earth, though.
Yeah, it's just cigarettes in a few different scenes are used, and I was like, okay, that's also a sign of the times.
Kind of mixing the two movies, Titanic and Avatar: Way of Water. We've talked a little bit about the tech of Avatar. Can we talk about the tech of Titanic?
Yeah.
This movie rules. Like
it totally holds up, doesn't it?
I would say there's some scenes where you can tell that the people are definitely a little computer people.
I see.
Like it's so cool that the ship itself is a model. I love that.
I could tell that as well this viewing on my 4K TV with a 1080p.
Oh yeah.
Copy of the film. I could tell. I was like, I can tell this is a
model.
But I still loved it. I'm much rather see
a model.
Yeah.
But like those sweeping shots, the little people, like when Captain Smith, you see tiny little Captain Smith walk to the captain, and he looks like a little clockwork man, and it doesn't quite look that good. But it doesn't matter because this movie came out in 1997, and like so many of the special effects shots. I didn't know how they did the engineers in the boiler rooms and the all those pistons. And apparently those pistons were real. They were on a preserved ship. And the people were comped in. So they were green screened in because it would be way too dangerous in 1995 to do that. But little things like that felt so genuine and It's like, how do they do that?
I know they cast very short people to play all of those worker roles as well, so that all of the
boilers
look way bigger.
Ah, that's cool.
Which they did in Alien, this little film you may not have heard me talk about before.
Alien,
the first film,
cool.
with the.
Do you mean E.T.? You mean like right, yeah.
Ridley Scott got his children and some other children on set to play the little versions of certain characters outside, so everything looked bigger.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the technical mastery of Titanic, just the mix of like huge live action effects, right? The water gushing down the staircase. I read apparently the first time they did it, it destroyed the entire set. They had to rebuild and do it again.
Wow.
The tilting of the deck, propeller guy, which another thing that I remember from childhood. It's like, hey, it's propeller guy. The stunts are all dramatic and real in a way that you feel the violence every time someone falls and hits something or splashes into the water. There is something with a real stunt performer that you just cannot replicate with a CG, cartoon man.
And even as small as it sounds, even lots of plates just falling off onto, it's very visceral and affecting, isn't it?
Also that scene where you have that imperceptible dissolve from young Rose into old Rose's iris. How do they do that? It doesn't look like a dissolve. It must be some sort of computer morphing, maybe like the Terminator 2 effects.
Well, they had that morphing because I think about various music videos, like the black and white video. They would use the morphing.
Oh, that's right. That was a big deal in those days.
So they did have that technology.
But also, I think just the verisimilitude of actually filming a lot of scenes on a full-size recreation of the Titanic. Like, they could do stuff back in 95 like this. Build an entire facade of an entire steamship. And it just makes it work.
So thrilling. Thrilling to watch.
You can't... And I guess James Cameron understands that with Avatar because that's what he's doing, except in the digital space. There's something that the human eye can pick up. If movement and facial expressions and things are just a little bit off, doesn't quite make sense. You almost can't tell that all the waves are digital. Like it looks that good.
And all the water effects and like on skin, the water on skin.
My gosh,
I didn't even pick it up. I just was watching the world of Pandora and completely believing it.
Right.
You mean in Avatar?
I thought,
I thought
but in Titanic as well.
Right.
When the ship is sailing, that model or that set was filmed, and the model was dry. The set was not.
Right.
But they animated the water around it, and you do not for 1 second question that.
Avatar was 100% felt 100% real, didn't it? And I think actually a lot of it was. That'll be why. But extraordinary.
I don't know how much. Do you guys know how much? Because I know the making of stuff is very tight-lipped about how much live action footage is actually in Avatar.
I think it's just the real
It's
humans.
just the people, right?
So you're thinking that the real humans swam underwater to be performance captured, but then that was made.
Absolutely.
All the water, I think, is CG.
Well, it's amazing.
They just filmed it in a big tank, so there's nothing.
There's this one shot that a lot of people online were talking about where I think it's Jake. He's riding one of those cool sea beasts, and he's gripping like a woven saddle. And the water kind of soaks into the saddle, and because the surface tension stays there, and it's a split-second shot from the trailer, and people were like, "This is the most incredible computer animation we've ever seen. Like it looks photo real."
So here's an argument that I saw somewhere, and it was about what James Cameron has that no other director has, which is hyperbole. I'm sure other directors have this, but what he has is oodles amounts of time, and he was given time to figure out the technology, to do it right, to do the scripts with his team, to wait for COVID to be kind of generally over so the film could come out, and that a lot of the CG artists have often said we ran out of time, we weren't given enough time, we weren't able to complete this to the way that we could. So here's my thing that I don't know the answer to: how much of it is performance capture in the way that James Cameron's made the film, and how much of it is just having the time and money for these artists to do what they know they can do and put together the best looking images possible.
Well put.
I don't know the answer to that, but it was just an interesting.
But speaking of James Cameron and time and money, one thing I learned from my reading about Titanic for this episode is that he basically made the movie as an excuse for going down to the Titanic and filming some footage, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to make the most profitable movie of all time, also at the time, the most expensive movie of all time, just so I can live out my dream of being a deep sea explorer.
Yeah.
And didn't he spend more time with the Titanic than anybody
Yeah.
on the original crossing by the time he'd done all of this time?
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the film cost more money to make than the original Titanic, even when adjusted for inflation.
Wow. Oh my god.
All right, final thoughts. Sarah?
I'd watch Titanic again, but I won't be watching Way of Water again.
All right.
That's it.
Nice and concise. I do want to watch Way of Water again, just in 3D, because I think it's, it's
should.
Avatar. Yeah. I also have never seen the first one in 3D. I know it's supposed to be amazing. Way of Water, I am surprised at how much I adore this movie. So much about it really, really works for me. Yeah, it's a little bit bloated. It is overlong. They could trim some stuff down. But I don't mind, because it's about being in this world, right? It's so well-defined and well thought out that the joy of just watching these kids swim with fantasy creatures is all I need. And if you have that amazing ending with the action sequence, we haven't even talked about the Titanic homage when Neteri and what's his name, Tuk, are stuck inside the sinking ship. And nowadays you can mount cameras in digital space, so the cameras are going crazy and upside down and rotating with the ship as it's going down. Incredible stuff. Just the visuals, the action, the big-hearted storytelling, the on-the-nose but still very, very well thought-out thing about conservation and about preservation and about loving the earth, right? There's that wonderful line with the kitty character where, and it's in the trailer, like she talks to Jake and it's like, Dad, I can hear her heartbeat. It was heartbeat, and what does it sound like? Mighty. Like, such a good line. Titanic, I haven't seen the longest time, probably 15 years,
Wow.
maybe 20. This movie rules, and you can totally see why it hit such a zeitgeist, right, when it came out. It has, as I said before, something for everyone. It is two movies in one, bookended by a third movie. And somehow, I think most of it really, really works. We've raved about the acting across the board. The little characters, you bring up Kathy Bates, Sarah, but also Frances Fisher is the mum.
Yeah.
What pitch perfect casting. Jonathan Hyde is like this ship can't sink. Like, amazing stuff.
Is it Bernard Hill? Is it his
Yeah,
name?
he's the captain. I do think Frances Fisher, unfortunately, is so vile in it that I have never been able to like her in a single thing else.
She is perfectly cast.
So that
Perfect.
film, absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, Billy Zane is the most love-to-hate villain ever. What a guy. And of course, just everything culminating in this disaster piece. Sorry, that means a bad movie. This romance, this epic, this tragedy, this disaster movie that just hits all the marks.
Nice. I love Titanic. I think it's in my top 52 films of all time. I say 52 because I think I'd love to make it as a pack of cards. But yeah, love Titanic, and just I was emotional. I was laughing. I was dreading the sinking. It really hit home for me again on rewatch. And similarly with Avatar 2. I mean, it's not the same heights of Titanic kind of was a zeitgeist moment, and whilst Avatar 2 is making a lot of money and deserves to do so, it's very much like the next episode in the story.
It feels a little bit like a bridge between episodes as well.
I think so, and I think it's making me very excited for what is going to come for episode 3, 4, and 5. So there we go. All right, thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and other great places where podcasts are shared. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which are great places to let us know what you think of this episode or give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then,
Noho ora mai!